Welcome to Offscreen. Today we're reading Killing on Carnival Row by Travis Beacham. In the city of the Burgue, a police inspector pursues a serial killer who is targeting fairies. This is probably one of the more popular unproduced scripts on the internet. It was Beacham's big break. He went on to write Pacific Rim, Clash of the Titans, some other stuff. And it's had a long history of being in development, of almost being produced, etc.
And you say now might be a TV show.
Now, yeah, it's looking like there's a chance it's turned into a TV show with Guillermo del Toro, who was once attached to direct the movie, producing, along with Beacham. But it was sold in 2005.
And it was on the very first blacklist.
Yeah, exactly.
2005.
And yeah, it's a popular one on the internet, I guess.
Yeah. Just Googling it, I immediately found people requesting it on Reddit. Although, maybe we could save them some time.
Oh, foreshadowing.
So should we get right into it?
Let's get into it.
Is there anything else you wanted to say about Beacham? That's pretty much it, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
We should also discuss how to pronounce all these names for a second.
Yeah.
So is it Philostrates?
Let me look this up.
Philostrates?
So Philostrate is a character from Shakespeare.
Lover of battle.
What?
That's what it means. Lover of battle.
Oh, Lover of Battle, yeah. Fictional character in a number of literary works, including Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Okay.
In that play, I don't need to read all this.
No, that's fine. So
but it does say pronunciations. It's usually pronounced Philostrate.
Philostrate. Okay.
It rhymes with illustrate.
What about, tourmaline? I'm just going to go for that.
This is going to be a struggle to pronounce all these names.
And Harrispex? Is that how you would say that other one?
I don't even remember who that is.
What? The Harrispex. The killer.
Sorry.
Okay, so then here's the summary. And I have not even shown you this, so hopefully it meets your approval. The city of Burgue, though home to various fantastical creatures, is currently in the grips of a social schism between humans and fairies. At its heart is the mysterious serial fairy killer known as Unseelie Jack, who leaves his victims not only wingless, but bloodless. That's where Rycroft Philostrates comes in. Philo, for short, works as an inspector for the city, and he's assigned to Jack's case. Things get personal when the killer's next victim is Tourmaline, a fairy who Philo had secretly been seeing in the brothel district known as Carnival Row. In addition to Philo's detective work, the police employ a blind old psychic known as Harrispex to help find the killer. But when she has visions of Philo together with Tourmaline, he becomes their prime suspect. Philo is forced to go on the run from his own peers, even as he rescues a fairy named Vignette from Jack's most recent attack. While still in hiding, Philo pursues his own leads, questioning an acquaintance named Professor Alcondri at the local museum. He's an expert on fairy biology, and, as Philo soon learns, actually conspired with the mayor to create Harrispex. The idea was to scare the fairy population out of the city of Burgue. But after his success with the creature, Alcondri got carried away. He now wants to father a race of fairy hybrids to take over the world. Oblivious to the professor's evil scheme, the mayor has his own plan for dealing with the fairies. He simply rounds them all up and imprisons them. Vignette only escapes because she's taken by Harrispex for use in Alcondri's experiments. For a second time, Philo comes to her rescue. They kill the evil professor, but now Harrispex has her sights set on the fairy prison, a veritable buffet for the monster. Together, Philo and Vignette take down the beast, freeing the fairy people while at the same time revealing Unseelie Jack for what he really was. Accordingly, the mayor is deposed for his role in Harrispex's creation. The city of Burgue arrives at an unsteady peace, a first step towards harmony between humans and fairies. But Philo and Vignette have their sights set on somewhere far away. They've fallen in love over the course of their last few days together, and now set off in a zeppelin to find their next adventure. The end.
It's good.
That's like a very simplified version, I would say. Anyway, overall impressions. First,
overall, I think I think the screenplay gets a lot of praise, and deservedly so, for its world building.
Yeah.
It really creates a place that feels lived in. There's a lot of little details that make it feel real.
There's some nice prose going on, especially in the beginning. Lots of really cool names. Like, there's just a fairy at the very beginning that dies, just as like the teaser sort of for the killer. And I guess it's pronounced like Eiling Cobweb. Just like, oh, that's an interesting little name. Just helps bring you into the world in the beginning. And like Rycroft, that's kind of a cool name. Rycroft
kind of makes you think of Mycroft from Sherlock Holmes.
I don't know.
Also a detective.
I'm not familiar.
Or an inspector.
Anyway, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. It's very colorful, very imaginative.
And a lot of attention, I think, is paid to sound and like the sound of the world.
I didn't particularly notice that, but
you get that right from the jump in the first.
I guess I thought that was mostly because they were trying not to show the killer yet. They had to resort to sound a lot. That's
but I think it's a pretty effective way to do it.
Yeah,
and I guess it's not visual, but it is cinematic.
You know what I thought would have been nice? I thought this was a good idea, which I couldn't tell if it was trying to get across or not. But that fairy that dies in the very beginning flies up onto like the tower of a bridge, and still this monster comes and takes it, and ends up killing the fairy. To me, that was already a clue that whatever this is, it can fly, which means it has wings, which means it might be a fairy.
Oh, interesting. I didn't.
Nobody ever pointed that out in the script because I guess they didn't see that fairy die.
I don't know.
And then, like, I don't know if humans are a minority necessarily, but there are a lot of non-human things going on here. Oh my gosh, those seal people were crazy.
Yeah. And so they're basically people with basically like human form, but they wear a living seal suit. They have like a connection to.
That was so weird, and it didn't even end up mattering, really. I mean, kind of, because you learn that the monster is like a hybrid, and it's part Selkie, I think is what they call the seal people.
Yeah.
And the monster at one point actually sheds its outer skin, which is like what the seal people do. But anyway, that was so bizarre. But as for the actual plot, never mind the whole world and everything. That was where it was lacking for me. It starts out okay. I think the first act is pretty solid. But it's very straightforward. It's kind of noirish. It's just like a noir that has been transplanted into a fantasy world.
Yeah, you used the word steampunk.
Yeah, sort of steampunk.
And it kind of has that vibe going for a lot of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. It touches on some interesting things, but it doesn't really develop them. There's some good ideas though. I like the idea the fairies are a very marginalized people. They're kind of thrust into a ghetto. The mayor is a wicked, awful person that is just a
almost bigot. Cartoonishly so.
I mean, by the end, it's definitely cartoonishly so.
Yeah.
The genocide that he tries to perpetrate just seems way too over the top for the rest of the story.
The moment I lost it was that scene with the fairy singer that was being brought in by his wife. You remember? The mayor's wife runs, like, she's the person, even though she's a human, the mayor's wife is in charge of, like, this fairy rights movement.
Right.
And they have sort of I don't even know what to call it. They just have a gathering of some kind. And
in order to raise awareness and to drum up support for fairy rights. Trying to get them suffrage.
And so they bring in, like, this famous fairy singer to perform. But then in it's like a ballroom or something where they're having it. There's like a gas that's released in the room that just kills everyone.
Yeah, that's what I was referring. Or that's what I meant. The genocide. Yeah, that was just too much. And then the mayor standing on the other side of a glass door,
just watches his wife die.
Well, yeah, like no big deal. His wife is dying.
Yeah,
painfully, tragically, or whatever. But he's just like chomping on a cigar too, which is a little champing. I don't know, chomping.
But also, side note, that scene reminded me in a weird way of The Fifth Element. Do you remember that part?
I haven't seen it.
Oh, what? Okay, there's a scene with, like, an opera singer.
Okay.
And while she's performing, there's, like, an attack on this... I think it's, like, on a spaceship where it's all taking place. So it's, like, intercutting between the opera singer and then this, like, attack that's going on. It just... it reminded me of the scene. There's no further point to that. I just wanted...
Oh, okay. Kind of like the... Did you see The Man Who Knew Too Much? Hitchcock movie?
I don't think I have seen that.
I think there's something similar, like in the theater, and it's intercut with... It's all very suspenseful as Hitchcock.
I'm sure. There was another thing that the mayor did that I thought was... It felt really forced early on.
Mm-hmm.
He talks to the police boss, like, Philo's boss.
Right.
And he just says, like, you need to have someone in custody within 24 hours.
Right.
Yeah, he doesn't even care if it's the right guy. He just wants for the people to feel safe. They just need to show progress.
See, I thought that was interesting.
No, it felt very, very artificial to me, like just a very fake ticking clock that the writer was trying to employ.
See, I kind of believe, like, I kind of don't find that to be a stretch that would happen, like, in real life.
Maybe not, but...
I don't know if I kind of doubt the mayor would say that in so many words.
Yeah.
But...
I've seen that in movies before, and I just feel like it's overdone, and it's a really transparent writing tool, but then it didn't even matter. They just never spoke of it again. I also felt like the way in which Philo ends up being suspected was a little much.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I don't even think they needed that in the whole story. I felt like they just thought, oh, we need more tension. Let's also have the police suspect Philo. Right. It could have just been him investigating it. I would have liked that more, I think.
It felt forced, and there were all these chase sequences that's like...
That just came and went really fast.
They came and went really fast, and I get they're supposed to make the plot move quicker and it's supposed to be entertaining, but they just felt like cheap, like...
The way that they got...
Someone, like he's responding to script notes that say this needs more action.
The way that he got away from most of those chases seemed so easy, too. Right. Like, they just slipped into a little alley once, and it was really narrow.
And how dumb does he have to be to show up at the crime scene when he knows that they're all looking at him? And he's just hiding behind a pillar.
That killed me.
Like, come on, bro. That's not smart. And he's supposed to be a smart dude.
Yeah. That was actually written in a way that it was unclear to me. It was, like, so dumb of him to do that I thought, oh, this must be on purpose, and he somehow came to an agreement with the police that they're going to still let him investigate, because the police are right there. I thought that they saw him and were, like, aware that he was there the whole time until there's a, like, specific line where it says, like, Philo is watching and hiding or something. And I was like, wow, okay, so he really is not being seen right now. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I couldn't handle that. That was dumb.
That was dumb. And, I mean, I don't think... It may not have mattered. Am I talking loud enough? Yeah. Okay, I don't think it probably would not have mattered. But from Philo's perspective, he probably should have just approached the police when they first accused him. He had, what's her name?
Vignette?
Vignette right there to vouch for him.
Yeah.
Flume trusts him. So
Flute. His name is Flute.
Yeah, Flute.
Yeah.
Trusts him. It would have been the more logical play than to just...
His apartment looks extremely incriminating. He has a tub full of fairy blood.
Right. But he also has a bleeding fairy who's willing to vouch for him.
Yeah, so why were they both hiding? Yeah, that was
so, like... And also, they were hiding in dirty... bloody water.
Which bloody they said fairy blood was supposed to be toxic, but then he does stuff like that, and I thought...
I think he was breathing, but...
Well, no, but, like, that still seems like a bad idea if it's toxic, but that was another thing I thought. For a while, I was trying to predict where this was going. I wanted it to be something like, oh, he's actually, like, part fairy himself, because he says that at one point he tells his whole backstory, and he was, like, born in the... like realm of the fairies or whatever, because his parents were like stationed there during some kind of outbreak of this fairy plague.
I think like the real world analog was that they were in the military in the human military in like fairy country, stationed in fairy country, and then there's this, I think, what is it, scourge that breaks out?
Yeah, it's like fairy specific epidemic.
Yeah, and it kills a bunch of people. He manages to get out. The only reason he's able to make it back to human land is because he is a human. Which I thought, that stuff was interesting.
That was cool. But
there's a lot of stuff that has real world analogs.
Yeah.
But the script ultimately betrays that by focusing more on the chases.
Yeah, and it gets really cliche towards the end too. I feel like all the potential real world implications or like moralizing they could have done just went out the window when it became this crazy monster that was out to just eat all the fairies.
Right. A monster that was the professor's creation.
Yeah.
Like, for so much attention to world building and creating this big, detailed world, all of the characters that we're introduced to are vital to the plot. Which runs kind of counter to it. It's very movie-ish. It does not make sense that everything is so connected.
I see. That's an interesting point. You're saying there should have been more characters that were not necessarily directly relevant.
The professor can just be a professor. It doesn't have to be this huge twist at the end where he's the guy behind it all.
That's
We're introduced to maybe a half dozen characters, and they're the only characters that matter. And yet they want to create, and yet the writer wants to create the impression of a big, expansive world.
That's a really interesting. I never really thought about that, but you're right, and that's another reason this would work better as a TV show. If
Definitely.
They had more opportunity to have all these side characters. Maybe they come and go in different episodes, but they're always there in the background, living their lives.
But it just all feels too closely tied too close together now. But yeah, I agree. I think it will work better as a TV show if that does get made. And it sounds like at least a pilot will be shot because Amazon's involved.
Oh. There's a ridiculous part I wanted to read. Philo has basically captured Harrispex, the psychic who you learn is actually just this crazy monster. And just on the verge of actually detaining him and everything, the cops show up and mess everything up because they're after Philo and they don't know the truth. And there's this whole shootout that happens, and so the Harrispex monster gets away, and it says he moves closer and sees a ruptured pipe spewing rippling gas into the hall. He glances at the cop's rifle just in time to see him pull the hammer back with his thumb. His finger tightens around the trigger. He yells no, and he pulls the trigger, and the spark from the gun explodes the whole building.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was ridiculous, and it just says, I guess it dedicates a few lines to describing the explosion, but in a matter of half a page, it went from just a shootout to noticing, I don't think that would happen anyway. There's a little bit of gas in the air and the whole building explodes.
Yeah, it seems improbable.
But I have a greater point here, which is that was, I think, one of the first markers for me of... This is a common thing that I've found. I haven't really put it into words before, I don't think, but in a lot of screenplays, I feel like this one especially started out with a lot of really nice prose, like we said. It's really taking its time and having fun describing things. And I understand to a degree when the story is reaching its climax, things get faster paced. You gotta do less of that. But it became almost ridiculous how quickly they described some things.
Right.
The way that explosion that played out.
It kind of moves from very patient and studied to just bam, 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 one thing to the next, right?
Yeah, so here's my other example. This is towards the very end. All of the fairies have been imprisoned. Philo and Vignette go to try and rescue them from this evil monster that's about to try and eat all of them. It starts with just a prison scene between a mom and her daughter, both fairies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a sad, nice little moment, which within one page, the Harrispex has grabbed Philo and broken through the ceiling and is flying into the air.
Mm-hmm.
And then within one more page, he has killed it and is falling, and all the fairies fly up and catch him so he doesn't fall to his death. All of that happens in 2 pages.
Yeah. And all of that is incredibly corny.
And, I thought that the thing
with
the fairies catching him, I thought that could be a really nice image. But
Yeah, but
the way they describe it, here's all that they use to describe it. Someone says, like, he's falling, and then, but before she can finish her plea, a group of fairies take to the air, they catch Philostrate. That's it. It's like one sentence thing, and it was like, I thought you could at least describe the visual of them, like, coming together and, like, forming a net or something. It could be, like, really beautiful, but...
And that's what makes it seem... That's what gives it its life, is, like, the attention to that sort of stuff. But to go back to that scene in the prison with the mother and the daughter...
Yes. Are you going to say what you think? I think you're going to say?
I don't know. What do you think I'm going to say?
How they talk about having to take a plink?
A plink, no.
There is a... Sorry to...
What's a plink?
You can say your thing after this, but the little fairy girl talking to her mom says she has to, like, go to the bathroom, but the fairy... I guess the fairy way of saying that is you have to take a plink.
Oh.
Do you not remember that?
No, I don't.
Oh, man, I love that.
No, but what I was going to say is that could, in a different screenplay or in a different situation, that could be a nice moment, but here, when it's entrapped by... action sequence on either side, it feels like a cloying, like, we're reminding the audience now that that they should feel sympathy for these characters.
Yeah, it's like the sort of thing they do in a superhero movie where it's in the middle of the fight with the main villain and it's like this huge monumental action set piece, but then you see like one kid in like on the street below that is about to get hit by a falling piece of debris or something, and so the hero swoops in and saves him. It's just like this one nagging little detail they stick in there to force you to remember like what's really at stake here. Yeah,
I mean, overall I was pretty disappointed by this. I had expectations. If you like read screenwriting forums online, if you read Reddit and all that stuff, this is a script that's been talked about for I guess like a decade now, and people have clamored for it to be made, and I think it's really lacking.
Yeah, but one thing that I would say this script showed me, or I think I've thought this before, but anyway, my point is, when you have a story that is potentially like allegorical for real life issues, there has to be more than just that thin like layer of metaphor or symbolism. It's more than just like a one-to-one relationship where like this means this and this means this. There's like, it has to have something that's more than the sum of those two parts. There has to be like a dialectic between the symbols and the real life corollary, I think. And in this screenplay, there was no dialectic there. It was just like, these things could represent these things in real life. That's it. There's no like further commentary on what that means. What does it mean that this can be illustrated this way? Like, what are you trying to say by illustrating it in this way?
I mean, I guess I agree with that completely. It's more observational than critical, I guess.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of the mayor's wife kind of fetishizing the fairies, valuing them not as like living creatures, but as things not as living creatures unto themselves, but only in terms of what they offer to humans, their music, their art. Is pretty interesting. That is a pretty interesting concept, and I really wish they had gone further with it. I guess.
Yeah, she was actually an interesting character, and yet she gets gassed to death.
And yet she gets gassed to death, and we're never given the impression before that the mayor really hates his wife so much. We're never really given a sense of why the mayor despises the fairies to begin with.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think for all of the world building, like, it didn't really make me care too much.
Well, okay, yeah, because that's one thing. World building is wholly separate and a different skill altogether than like fleshing out the characters. And I really felt like the relationships, especially between Philo and the like two main love interests, was really weak. Like you only get a little bit of time with that first fairy, Tourmaline, or however you say it, the one that he was seeing, who ends up being killed. But even with Vignette, they have a scene where it's like a campfire type scene where he's telling his whole backstory. Right. They almost have sex, and then he sees like on the wall is like a poster for a show that like his old girlfriend she had been like a painter, and she actually was the one who painted that picture, and so it made him think of her, and he couldn't go through with it.
Right.
Anyway, that was all really like shallow and easy to me. I felt like that was too.
I hardly want to address the romance stuff because it's so bad.
Yeah, that was, I think, one of the most painful parts for me was some of that stuff.
I think the Tourmaline stuff works. I think it's interesting that he's very sympathetic to the fairies, and yet, like Tourmaline says, he's afraid to...
He's still too ashamed to actually have a public relationship with her.
Right.
Which then, of course, we're supposed to see that he's come full circle in the end, and it's that Vignette is kind of shy about showing her affection in public, and he's the one that's like holding her hand and making the effort, and that's in theory a nice character arc, but
it's also a really cheap, easy one.
What
made him fall? I mean, I get, like, to quote Bob Dylan, people that suffer together have stronger connections than those that don't. And clearly they suffered together as they were on the run for like 60 pages.
Yeah.
But, like, why did they fall in love?
Yeah,
and isn't he just mourning the death of someone that he cared deeply for?
Yeah, that's really messed up. That was the most messed up aspect to me. Like, his last lover just died a few days ago, and he's already pretty much over it, it seems like.
I mean, there's no... I think this is probably one of my bigger problems. That it's too focused on the chase element that it forsakes character stuff that would make this feel a whole lot more believable.
I can't really think of a whole lot else I had to say.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, that's all. Should we get to the verdicts?
I guess so. I'm going to be sort of conservative in this judgment. Yeah. I was not a fan of the screenplay, but I would still consider the writer, I think. I would pass on the script. This is not... maybe it's just not my cup of tea, but I feel like also... None of this should matter. I'm trying to put this in context a little bit. If this was a writer's first script, if they were to actually make it, it would be obviously really complicated and probably expensive. So in that sense, it's probably not a good thing to go ahead and buy up and want to produce. But as a writer, yeah, sure, I'd be willing to give the writer another chance. So that's where I stand. Pass on the script.
I'd pass on.
Consider
I would pass
on the
on
writer.
the script to get.
Would you pass on the writer?
I'd pass on the script, and I'd probably give a mild consider to the writer. There's some good writing here, I guess.
Yeah, I like that you said mild consider on the writer.
Mild consider on the writer.
I agree with that.
And honestly, I'm not sold. I don't know.
You could even maybe pass on the writer?
I could maybe pass on the writer.
If I had my own production company...
I'll go mild consider. I'll stick with my consider. Consider the writer. There's some good stuff here if they develop it further. Develop their voice or whatever further.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next week, we're going to read a script called Afterlife by Joss Whedon. A scientist's mind is implanted into a younger man as part of a research project. One problem, the younger man is a serial killer.
Guillermo del Toro would have been a good director for this.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally.
This is like right up his alley.
Has anyone seen Del Toro in the same place as Peter Jackson at the same time? Are we sure that they're not the same person?
They look the same.
They're both directors and they're both fat and bearded. Yeah, that's all I need. These are two people that work on fantasy films, Steven, with lots of makeup.
Didn't they work on The Hobbit together? Or something like that?
See?
Yeah.
They have a makeup person that just makes them look slightly different, depending on who they're appearing as.
Yeah.
Has busted that whole thing wide open. We should make a fantasy movie about that.
Boom.